Welcome to another edition of Safe Workplace Dialogues. I'm Pradeep. I lead the customer success team at Lawcubator. I'll be your moderator for today's session. Uh, for those who are joining us for the first time, Lawcubator is a workplace compliant platform where we help organizations to build safe and compliant workplace. At the heart of our platform is a secure complaint redressal system that allows organization to handle sensitive issues like sexual harassment with confidentiality, and transparency. We also offer a wide range of e-learning courses on topic like PoSH. Then we have workplace ethics and intellectual property awareness. Along with it, we have DEI and many more trainings. So today's topic is Code of Conduct and PoSH, building a culture of respect at work. So now we are fortunate to be joined today by an inspiring woman who has been at the forefront of driving safer and more inclusive workplace. Uh, Thank you so much for joining us, Rishti. Let me introduce Rishti. Rishti is a visionary people and culture expert known for blending creativity with impact-driven HR strategy. With a career spanning over 15 years across India, US, UK, and Europe, and beyond. So, with a career spanning over 15 years uh, across sectors including AI, tech, consulting, retail, fashion, F&B, education, and social impact. Her expertise spans HR framework, labor law, compliance, then employee experience and governance, supporting high growth organizations across global landscapes. Now, with a strong track record in strategic HR leadership, Rishti brings a unique ability to pivot between strategy and hands on execution, making her a sought after voice in conversation across organizational growth, transformation, and people first leadership. Welcome, Rishti. Uh, Rishti, thank you so much for joining, and we would love to hear more from your end. How are you? And before we start our webinar, if you have more things.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. I think whatever you said, if you could share that write up with me and I can send it across to my new clients. I'll not have to write because that was actually great. And I have also never thought about all that stuff, what you said right now. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. Since Pradeep has given a great background about me, just in short, I have spent, approximately close to 2 decades working across people strategy, organizational culture, and growth. One thing has become very clear to me that workplace culture is rarely shaped by big policies or announcements. It is shaped by everyday behavior. The way leaders speak in meetings, the way colleagues treat each other, the small decisions that quietly define what is acceptable. And I think that's what exactly why conversations around code of conduct and PoSH are so important, because ultimately it's not just legal or labor law compliance or any other compliance. It's about creating workplaces where people feel respected, safe, and able to do their best work. So today I'm looking forward to unpacking this topic with you through some practical examples from real organizations.
Uh, Very well said. Welcome, Rishti. Yes, I believe the session will be really inspiring and lot to learn from you and your experience. Without further ado, let's start with our round one. Uh, the first question for you, Rishti, is how would you define a workplace code of conduct, and why is it important in context of POSH?
Let me start with a little background to it here, wherein, whenever organizations talk about code of conduct policies, there are usually two reactions. Some people say, yes, of course, it is important, while others quietly think this is probably another policy document I have to sign during onboarding and, never have to open again. But the truth is, code of conduct is just not another HR document. It's actually the behavioral blueprint of an organization. It tells us something very simple but yet powerful. So, it tells us how do we treat each other here? And that question sits right at the heart of PoSH workplace respect and organizational culture. So, To start with, let me start with a simple way I can explain this to the leadership teams. A code of conduct is the behavioral compass of an organization. As we said, policies tell us what the rules are, but the code of conduct tells us how we are expected to behave with each other every day. And if I had to simplify it more, it's a code of conduct. Code of conduct is the behavioral constitution of an organization. In context of PoSH, this extremely becomes important because sexual harassment rarely starts as a dramatic incident or a very big incident. It often begins with small boundary violations, inappropriate jokes, personal comments, exclusionary behavior. For example, if I have to give, in one of the meetings that we used to sit a few years back, it was quite common that when someone from operational team was speaking about something and the technical team people used to just brush them off with an inappropriate joke, and particularly if that person was a female, then it was a completely different story. So, what we understood it could be a comment or someone's appearance, a joke that might feel uncomfortable, or repeated personal messages even outside works. Individually, these might look minor, but collectively, they shape the safety of the workplace. In my career, working across startups, growing companies, and social impact organizations, I've seen something very clearly. When behavioral expectations are clear and consistently reinforced, incidents reduce significantly. Whether, code of conduct is maintained, the POSH automatically comes down. And that's why, because people understand where the line is. So, a code of conduct doesn't just support POSH compliance, it creates a culture where respect becomes a default behavior for everyone, even people who are coming inside the organization as visitors. It essentially answers a very important question. Again, how do we treat each other in this organization? And when that answer is clear, POSH implementation becomes much stronger.
Uh, Very well said, Drishti. I strongly believe with the points, and of course, when you mentioned like code of conduct becomes just a piece of paper, and that is a hard-hitting point. We, of course, neglect such policies, and they're just formalities when it comes to onboarding or maybe HRs. They just have to be behind the new employees just to accept them, go through the trainings, and yes, so we would like to see how like it transforms. And now with that good answer, that good start, I think we are ready to move on to our next question, which is like how many organization like there are many organizations already, they have POSH and DEI policies. Why do you think a broader code of conduct is still necessary?
So, this is a great question and is something many organizations also ask me as an HR advisor or as a POSH consultant. Think of it this way: POSH policies deal with specific violations, DEI policies talk about inclusion and fairness, but workplace in a much wider spectrum. For example, disrespectful communication, misuse of power, exclusionary team dynamics, inappropriate humor. More than that, these may not always fall directly under POSH or DEI, but they still affect psychological safety of the employees and hence the organization. I remember I once worked with a company where the leadership said we don't have POSH complaints, so we must be doing well. But when we conducted employee listening sessions individually, one to ones, and also, confidentially, we discovered something interesting. Many employees said that they didn't feel comfortable speaking up in meetings or challenging senior colleagues. Technically, of course, that wasn't POSH, but culturally, it was a signal of an unsafe environment. And that's where the code of conduct becomes powerful. It creates a shared behavioral baseline across the organization. So, in other words, a code of conduct connects all of these pieces together and answers one simple question: how do we treat each other? And that clarity is incredibly powerful.
So, Rishti, the answer indeed it impressed me, and of course, it would have had an impact on everyone who's listening over here. So, of course, this is something which comes from within. But as an organization, we still have to implement certain policies. There have to be certain rules, uh, certain regulations which they should be worked upon. Now, with this start, I think the next few rounds are going to be way more interesting, and I'll not take much time. I'll take you to the next round where we will discuss about how PoSH and Code of Conduct are associated. Like it just gave us the first few questions, just gave us the context. Moving on to the next question, like. Uh, how does a well-drafted code of conduct help in preventing sexual harassment incident before even they arise?
See, prevention works best when expectations are visible and understood, or in other words, clear or relatable to everyone in a same manner, not similar, same manner. A good code of conduct doesn't just contain legal language, it includes real life examples of workplace behavior. So, as per me, a strong code of conduct does three things. First, it defines acceptable and unacceptable behavior clearly. Second, it gives employees practical examples and not just legal language or jargons. And lastly, it sets the tone that respect is a non negotiable workplace value. So again, citing an example, I once worked with an organization where, we instead of saying maintain professional boundaries, the code included examples like avoid commenting on personal appearance in professional settings, respect personal boundaries in communication, avoid jokes that target gender identity, do not ask any questions related to personal life, even if it's an interview or an informal communication. So when employees see these examples, something interesting happens. Once people saw those examples, many said, "Oh, I didn't realize that, that could make someone uncomfortable." And trust me, that was a very powerful movement for HR, for managers, and even for leaders. Because sometimes prevention is simply making invisible behaviors visible.
Indeed, like lack of information do work in that direction. Now,
I
with
would say
that,
not lack of just information, lack of clear information, because at times information is there, but it's not clear and hence it's interpreted by everyone in their own way. Hence, no uniformity.
surely. So, with that, I think we can move on to our next question, uh, which is like many companies create a code of conduct but struggle to implement it. Where are the common gaps that you have noticed?
So, this is one of the most common issues I have seen and I still see. And yes, this happens a hell lot of. Organizations write beautiful policies and then, they quietly live in the HR handbook forever. The three most common gaps that I have seen recently have been first is, of course, lack of awareness. Employees sign the document during onboarding but rarely revisit it. There are no refreshing sessions that happen, no examples that are given, no further communications that happen. Second is the leadership behavior inconsistency. If leaders don't model the behavior, the policy loses the credibility. If leaders ignore code of conduct or behave inconsistently, employees immediately notice. I always say employees don't believe in policies, they believe patterns of leadership behavior. They learn what they see instead of what's there in written. And the third gap is lack of integration. That is, no connection to the policy with the daily decisions. The code of conduct should show up in performance reviews. It should show up in leadership expectations. It should show up in team conversations. Otherwise, it remains a document instead of a cultural driver. I remember in the start of my career, that is around 16 years back, once a CEO told me something very insightful and still stays with me. Policies don't shape culture. My, as a leadership behavior, does. And today, I couldn't agree it more.
And even I cannot agree more with your distinctive thoughts. And I believe, yeah, everyone across in the chat also would agree with the points that if the, it is implemented across, and for sure that is very tough. So I believe all the 3 points which I've mentioned would surely help a lot of organizations to fill those gaps. And now, with that, I think we should move to our next question. That is, how can organizations reinforce connection between code of conduct with PoSH, and what role does leadership play over here? I believe this question is in sync with the last one, and we can associate it and try to get more points on this. Yeah.
So true. So Pradeep, as you rightly mentioned, it's connected because code of conduct, POSH, and leadership behavior do not work in isolation. The key of connect is integration. Often, POSH training is treated as a separate legal session, but POSH awareness should be connected with everyday workplace behavior. So, in reality, POSH and code of conduct should reinforce each other. So, some examples, something that I have done and they have given good results is during POSH workshops, we have discussed expectation, conduct, code of conduct expectations also. We have used real scenarios employees face within that organization, whether they have made complaints or as an HR or leaders or managers have shared. Because before the sessions, we have had a one-to-ones with the managers and leaders and HRs to include, real scenarios of the same organization so that employees can relate to it. And also, we have encouraged leaders to discuss respectful behavior in team meetings. While we are having, whether it's performance meetings or it's one to one between managers and employees, or leaders is, having a discussion or similar meetings, whether formal or informal, leaders have spoken about how to behave and what not to be done. Also, in, various workshops that I do, I often ask teams a simple question: what does respectful behavior look like to them in their daily work? And people immediately mention things like giving credit for ideas, not interrupting colleagues that has been the highest ranked, and being mindful of language. Those conversations help employees understand the respectful culture, and POSH preventions are deeply connected. Leadership, plays a critical role here. Employees observe leaders very closely, as we said, how the consistency in leadership behavior models the employees behavior, which actually turns into a workplace culture. If a leader shuts down an inappropriate jokes or addresses an inappropriate comment in a meeting immediately, that sends a much stronger message than any policy document or HR reaching out in one to one. How did you feel? Hope you did not feel bad. And sending an email to the other person, you shouldn't have done this. When it's happening, it should be stopped then. So, culture is shaped by what leaders tolerate and what they reinforce.
So now we have discussed like what roles does the leadership has to play in such scenarios. Now I think this brings us to our next uh, round. That is like real challenges. What all challenges are there? So yes, there are roles for even senior employees, leadership, and across team. But we when we discuss day-to-day challenges, they do differ. Now, that brings me to my next question. That is, are there any common behavioral issue that organizations overlook because they are not explicitly categorized as sexual harassment, but still create an unsafe environment?
Absolutely. And these are surprisingly the most common issues across the organizations, whether it's a startup, whether it's an NGO or foundations, whether it's a mid-sized or matured company, and across, all the industries and at all levels. A few common examples that were found were persistent personal comments, particularly at the lunch table or in sales meetings. Favoritism, exclusion from informal networks. Manager is going but not allowing the other team members to come along and grow. Subtle intimidation. This is how she wears, this is how he walks, this is how he eats or writes. Dismissive behavior in meetings. Comments or jokes disguised or framed as humor. It was only a joke. Why can't you take it? So individually, these may look small, but over time they create a workplace where some employees feel uncomfortable, unheard, or even unsafe. And culture is shaped by these everyday interactions by everyone. One leader, I remember again, once told me, but we were joking. This is, during my consulting assignments while I was working. And I responded with something very simple. Humor is great, but only if some people are laughing. We should pause and reflect. So these behaviors may not meet the legal definition of posh or even, the other laws that we have in India, but they do shape how safe employees feel at work.
Absolutely. So, Vrishti, indeed, like a joke to someone is not joke for everyone. So they have their own scenarios, and this is where I believe diversity should be taken care of. And now, with that brings me to the next question: like, how should organizations deal with such subtle and gray behavior area that violates the spirit of code of conduct? Now, this is a question where I think a lot of people must be looking for.
See, each organization has a different reason. They have a different vision, they have a different value system, but respect remains the core of each value of each workplace. So, gray areas need early conversation and guidance and not punishment or immediate escalation. The first step that has, usually seen to be a good step has been awareness and education, and not one time but continuous. It's not like done the workshop, now it's happening. No, daily communications. What is happening? How it's happening? Many people genuinely do not realize how their behavior impact others. Hence, that awareness is also important. Managers should feel comfortable addressing issues early with simple conversations like, that comment might make someone uncomfortable. Let's keep the workplace respectful. Within their team meetings also. Because if someone is, putting a comment or a joke within the internal team meeting, they might say the same to others, even to the clients. So it's not only the workplace, but even loss of business. Often people adjust immediately. Think of it like course correction rather than crisis management or punishment. The earlier we address these situations, the less likely they escalate into serious issues. So when we speak about awareness and education, we are not only speaking about the awareness and education of employees, but specifically also for managers, because managers are the people, is the layer that is connecting with both upper management and the team below. And hence, they are the people who can actually make difference by creating that workplace through communications.
So that was very well answered, and I think that gave us like uh, the depth of that very question, and the answer from was very lovely. So I really want to underscore your point on gray area behaviors. That is where the true risk mitigation should happen. So a merely unprofessional or disrespectful comment can often lead to an habit, or maybe uh, further it will impact the overall culture. And good organizations are known for their culture. It has been a saying, and often we while we are joining somewhere, we always look for it, like how's the everything comes secondary. Initial, it has to be like, how is it there, how are people treating over there. So this has been a case not only with women's in particular, but yeah, men's also these days, they just check it. Like, we all are looking for a safe, inclusive, and a better workplace. Now that brings me to the next question. So someone who is enforcing, someone who is responsible. So what role can HR and the internal committee play together in strengthening conduct standards across the organizations?
Okay, so Pradeep, again taking a step back from where I stand as an HR, as an IC, as well as a leader in the organizations and a manager to a team, I think everyone plays a role. Of course, the JD of HR and IC says it and not the other, but it's a responsibility for everyone. And if we speak about specifically HR and IC, then they are partners in building safe workplaces. They play complementary roles. The IC ensures or focuses on fair investigation and legal compliance, while HR focuses on culture building, prevention, and education, as we spoke about awareness. When they work together or collaborate effectively, organizations can move from reacting to incidents to preventing them. Some effective practices, those who have worked for me for the organizations that I work or have worked in past is joint awareness sessions. As we spoke, while we are doing a PoSH session, we're also talking about conduct and DI. Scenario based behavior workshops, having the real use cases within the company as well as some things that have been published outside to make an example. Leadership training or a manager training on respectful conduct and accountability and how to manage cases within the team. Because what we have seen is if something happens, it's the manager who can find it in the first during conversation. They can ask what has happened, they can see the change in behavior every day, and an employee as a team feels more comfortable to connect with the manager or a leader instead of HR and IC. Hence, training a manager and a leader on the respectful conduct, accountability, and communication is something that has always worked well. So that collaboration makes a huge difference. And this partnership ensures both compliance and culture are addressed together in a people perspective way, making the organization's culture first.
Yeah, actually, it's everyone's responsibility to not only just HRs and the internal committee, it's just in their JD, but yeah, the strength, it just comes from everybody. So there have been a lot of takeaways from our discussions. I think now we'll dive deep into the practical takeaways we can take out from this very session. And there have been a lot of insightful thoughts from Rishti, and I think yeah, people can even they'll have a lot of questions. And of course, guys, we have kept some time at the end just so that we can connect for questions as well. Without taking much ado, I'll take you to the next part, that is what all practical takeaways are there, just from the perspective of code of conduct, and from the PoSH and the policies which we draft. So it brings me to the next question, which is what are some best practices organizations can adopt to build a culture of respect and accountability?
Sure. See, there are many practices that an organization can adopt based on the mindset of the people, the thought process, the scalability. In my experience, five practices consistently have made a difference irrespective of the size of the organization or the industry or the geography. Leadership and manager modeling respectful behavior. Because at the end of the day, most of the things, and particularly the behavior, runs from top to bottom. People see and do instead of read and do. Then clear and simple conduct guidelines, or in other words, expectations, and not one time but continuous, wherein we are not only telling them what is good but also telling them what is not expected. Regular awareness conversations about the workplace behavior and not just annual training. So for example, the organizations that I am associated with, we make sure that these kind of conversations are happening between manager and the team in during one to ones. These are happening during quarterly meetings that we have with all the employees telling about the organization. And also, even on lunch table we make sure that these conversations take place. Encouraging employees to speak up safely and taking action consistently when issue arise. Consistency in the behavior by everyone, particularly leaders, HRs. So respectful workplace don't emerge by accident. They are designed and reinforced intentionally, time by time, and they evolve.
Of course, they do evolve, and we just have to adapt to the evolution. Like things are changing. Nowadays we see there are different age gaps between employees. There have been a cultural differences, but still the end goal has to be taken care. Along with it, I strongly believe should also make sure like the culture and the respect along with it, the accountability for most of the most of the behaviors has to be taken care of. And as you have addressed, Rishti, in the previous discussions, like it has to be the manager, it has to be the senior leadership who has to point out if there is something which is addressed and may impact. So if it is addressed initially, it won't lead to a culture, it won't lead to an habit, and eventually, like there'll be people who will understand what all accountability we have regarding the behavior, and that will of course be adopted against. So very beautifully answered, Drishti. I think that takes us to our last question. That is, what final advice would you give to organizations that want to move from policy compliance to genuinely safe workplaces?
So, I leave in everyone here and even the organizations with one thought. Organizations that succeed should ask themselves a different question. Currently, they ask, do we have the right policies? But I think they should start asking, do people actually feel respected and safe here? And culture is shaped by everyday decisions, the meetings we run, the language we use, the behaviors we tolerate. When those decisions consistently reflect respect and accountability, workplaces become safer for everyone. So, my advice is very simple: don't treat PoSH as a legal requirement, treat it as a culture commitment, because these are leadership commitments. Policies create compliance, but culture creates safety. Because when employees feel safe, they speak up, they collaborate better, and they perform better. And ultimately, organizations become stronger and a greater business impact. So at the end of the day, safe workplaces are not built by policies alone. They are built by leaders who choose respect in everyday decisions.
So very well said. Like it is the leaders, it is the senior guys who just have to uh, take care of it. Not only just implementing throughout the discussion. To summarize it, we have discussed upon, like, not it's just not a piece of paper, to quote Rishti, and it has to be implemented in a way where everyone is held responsible, and it just forms a culture. Now, I believe we've completed our discussions. We now open the floor for audience questions. If you have any questions for our panelists, please drop them in the chat.
By the time the questions are coming in, can I ask audience a question which they can probably respond in the chat box?
Yes, please.
Sure. So I would like to ask, understand from the audience, when you hear the phrase code of conduct, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Again, no answer is right or wrong. Just what's the first thing without thought that comes to your mind when you hear the phrase code of conduct?
Okay, I think we have first answer. So Sashank has responded like rules. Now Shri has responded uh, workplace behaviors. So we are looking for more answers. Then again, Tanusha has responded company culture. Jyoti responded with guidelines for expected behavior in organizations. Soumya responded personal guidelines. I think there'll be more responses to this. And thank you guys for responding. And I believe if there are more, we'll we'll wait for them.
So, see, the
Uh,
responses that we have received, they automatically come up into as a compliance requirement, legal protection for the company, guideline for respectful behavior. And this response itself tells us something about how policies are perceived in their organization.
of course.
No one
So
said safety, or no one said happiness when it came to code of conduct.
in the meanwhile, we have more questions.
Sure.
I'll show you a glimpse of our course on the platform and how it appears. Uh, so I hope the screen is now visible. So this is our code of conduct and ethics course, where I would like to take you to a few of the topics. These are the topics we have covered along with the final assessment. Okay, these are the topics we have covered with our final assessment. Just like this, I'll be playing one of our clip. I think I should play this one.
Let's take a closer look at another important aspect of workplace ethics: fostering a culture of integrity and honesty. At ABC Private Limited, the revenue team was working on a high-profile pitch for a potential new client. The team had been putting in long hours, collaborating on ideas and strategies. Pooja, a junior member of the team, had spent weeks researching market trends and creating a detailed report that could be the key to winning the client over. She was excited about her contribution, confident that her work would stand out. However, when the team gathered for a final presentation to senior management, Raj, a senior team member, presented Pooja's work as his own. He outlined the market research, the strategies, and even highlighted the key findings that Pooja had developed without mentioning her name at all. Pooja was in the room, watching in disbelief. She couldn't believe Raj was claiming her hard work as his own, and her frustration was palpable. But being new to the company and unsure of how to react, she kept quiet, hoping that someone would speak up. Pooja's heart raced as Raj confidently presented her work to the higher-ups.
You're on mute, Pradeep.
Yeah, just like this, thank you, Rishti. Just like the story, we have used multiple scenarios to explain the concept in a better way for our employees. Uh, if you would like to take this conversation further with our internal teams, we have e-learning courses on PoSH. Then we have Workplace Code of Conduct available in regional languages, along with a robust PoSH compliant management system. Please feel free to reach out to us after this session if you'd like to access. Now, let's get back to the questions in the chat. Okay, now we have a question from Seema Kapoor. Okay, so I think Arishti, you'll take it ahead. Shima is asking, what about male victim employees in PoSH?
Okay, so that's an important and often under discussed question, and let me address that in a very practical manner.
Hmm.
While the PoSH Act is designed specifically to protect women at the workplace, the principle behind it is a safe and respectful workplace which is gender neutral. So, when we talk about male employees or any other gender facing inappropriate behavior, the question shifts from does PoSH cover this to does our organization ensure safety for everyone? In my experience working across organizations, male employees do face uncomfortable or inappropriate situations, but often again they don't report it, they don't label it as harassment, or they don't feel it won't be taken seriously. And even sometimes it gets brushed off as a humor, which is where the culture needs attention. So, good organizations don't stop at compliance. They build inclusive conduct frameworks. That means having gender neutral code of conduct, creating a safe reporting channels for everyone, properly a disciplinary committee or a grievance redressal committee, addressing inappropriate behavior regardless who is involved. And as I said, training managers or leaders to respond with sensitivity and not bias. This is where the leadership maturity shows because the message should be clear. Respect at the workplace is not gender specific. If someone feels uncomfortable, unheard, or unsafe, it is a workplace issue and just not a legal category or a compliance. In a simple way to think about it, POSH is a law, but workplace safety is a culture choice. And culture should ensure safety, respect, and heard by everyone towards everyone. So, if organizations focus only on who the law protects, they will do the minimum. If they focus on who the workplace should protect, they will build the right culture. And I think that is and should be the real goal of the organization.
Uh, I believe, Seema, that answer would have cleared that question. So, yeah. Uh, okay, now we have one more question. That is, just like every company is doing annual PoSH trainings, should there be annual trainings on code of conduct too? Because, or if he's asking, because only a policy may not suffice. So, Rishti,
No.
I think you can answer. Martin has asked this. What are your thoughts on it?
That's a great question, Martin, and honestly, a very relevant one in current times. Short answer, yes, absolutely. But if I go a step further, it's not just about annual training. It's about making code of conduct a continuous conversation and not a one-time session. As I previously said, when I am conducting PoSH trainings, I am including code of conduct as the permission of the organization and the part of the training. So, let me even explain in a better manner. Most organizations do annual PoSH training because it's a compliance requirement. But if you look at how workplace issue actually merge, they really start at a clear PoSH violations. As we discussed previously, they begin with everyday behaviors. Casual comments, inappropriate joke, exclusions in meetings, misuse of authority. And that's where the code of conduct role actually plays. Rightly said, a policy document sitting on the intranet or our employee files doesn't shape behavior because people don't remember policies. They remember conversations, examples, and what leaders reinforce. So yes, having a structured annual touch point on code of conduct helps. It helps in reinforcing expectations, clarify gray areas, align teams on what good behavior should look like and what is not expected they should not do, prevent issues before they escalate. But the important shift should be that instead of treating code of conduct like PoSH just once a year training, we miss the real impact because behavior, as said, is shaped daily and not annually. So, from my experience, three things that have worked for me and the organizations I work for is revisit the expectations as and when we can through our behaviors and not only through trainings or awareness sessions. Real situations should be discussed and shared, hence making it real conversations and not what's written in the policy. And of course, leadership led or managers led reinforcement, wherein the leaders or managers call out behavior in real time, because that's where the actual shift happens. And of course, I have seen in a few organizations wherein the code of conduct is linked to the performance reviews also. So, PoSH training does help people understand what is unacceptable, but code of conduct helps people understand what is acceptable and is expected. And both are equally important because, safe workplaces are not built only by preventing violations, but also by respecting kind of normalizing the respect. I hope I was able to give that answer.
Yeah, I think yes, that was a very good answer and pinpoint to the concerns. Like, I do believe like only one policy won't suffice. There are organizations who have policies depending on the situation. Now we have one more question. We have tried to answer a different version of it earlier in our discussion. Sashank has asked, in your experience, what is the biggest gap between companies' written code of conduct and actual behavior? So we have answered it in different phases, but now this has merged up, and that is a serious question.
Sure. So again, that's a serious and a great question, and honestly, one I see across almost again every organization I worked with. If I had to summarize it in one line, it would be, the biggest gap is not in the policy; it's in the everyday behavior, particularly by leaders and managers. Most companies actually have a well-written codes of conduct. The intent is right, the language is strong, and the document covers everything it should. But where the gap shows up here is what is written versus what is tolerated. So, for example, one of the companies, a startup that I was working with, it said we value respect and inclusivity. But in reality, senior leaders used to interrupt people in meetings. Inappropriate jokes were brushed off as harmless, again, particularly in the sales meeting. Feedback was not encouraged or safely received. And there were a lot of negative rumors that went about after the meeting. And employees pick up on this very quickly. In my experience over the last 2 decades, working in people strategy, employees don't really follow policies. They follow the patterns of behavior around them, particularly by their managers and leaders. Sorry. And especially again, so even a small inconsistency can create a large gap. The second gap that I often see is lack of translation into daily work. Policies are written in formal language, and so hence employees are left wondering, what does this actually mean for me in day-to-day behavior? Because there are no examples, there are no conversations, there are no reinforcement, and hence code of conduct cannot convert itself from a document into practice. And I think last of the major gaps is silence. When behaviors that go against the code of conduct are not addressed, and I'm not talking about the big ones, the small ones that happen every day, it sends a strong signal. This would be acceptable. If they are doing, we can also do. And hence the culture gets shaped into that silence. So if I were to simply say, the gap is not awareness, the gap is consistency. Consistency in leadership behavior, consistency in everyday decisions, consistency in how quickly we address what is not okay. Because at the end of the day, again, code of conduct is not what is written in the handbook. It is what people see, practice every day.
Thank you, Rishti, for answering that. And I think this session and the questions which we have portrayed and discussed, if any new organization, new startup, or if an well-established organization is planning to form their new policies, I believe there are a lot of takeaways given our discussion, and these questions they truly are will also help. Now we have one more question from Sashank. I think he's paying good attention, and there'll be a lot of things which we have delivered. And thank you, Rishti, for that. How do you ensure fairness when both parties in a complaint feel they are right? Okay, so
Okay.
that is urgent discussion.
Yes, but that's again a very real and common situation in the area I work. And honestly, if both parties feel they are right, it usually means there is a perception gap and not necessarily a clear villain and a victim. As I said, because in policies we are using a lot of jargons, and hence the perception of the same word is very different for each. So the goal is not to decide who feels right, but to establish what actually happened and how it aligns with workplace standards. A few ways that I have approached these situations and have worked is always, the we always say during our PoSH trainings, intent versus impact. So always separate intent from impact. One person may say, I didn't mean anything wrong, but the other may have experienced discomfort. In workplace matters, impact carries more weight than intent. So, we need to focus on what was experienced. Would a reasonable person feel uncomfortable in that situation? Also, always follow a structured and unbiased process, not an opinion. I feel like that. No. What happened? Let's be practical. So, this would mean listening to both sides without interruption or without thinking what has happened in the past. Documenting facts very clearly. If I am reading that document, I should understand and feel the same what a third party might feel. Avoiding any assumptions and sticking to the guidelines and timelines. The moment we move away from the process, our thought process and bias comes in. Then, another is look for consistency and evidence. We assess consistency in statements, supporting evidence, and even patterns of behavior through interviews. So it's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about understanding what most likely would be true, or what actually happened. And always, use a helpful question. Would a reasonable person in the same situation feel uncomfortable, unsafe, or disrespected? This helps in moving us from conversation from personal opinions to objective assessments. And again, maintaining dignity for both parties is very important. No humiliation, no judgmental language, very clear communication, because both individuals are a part of workplace, and how we handle the process impacts the overall trust in the system. So, if I have to summarize this, fairness is not about choosing a side. It's about following a process that people have a trust in, even if they don't agree with the outcome. They know that, okay, the organization has done its best, is going to do its best. And my experience, when the process is transparent and respectful, even difficult decisions are more likely to be accepted by everyone.
So yeah, Drishti, I believe that summarized lot of points, and I think we don't have any more questions. So thank you so much, Drishti, for sharing such practical uh, and experience-driven insights. And to everyone who has joined us, thank you so much for taking our time and being part of this conversation. I really appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Have a good
Pradeep. Thank you, Lawcubator. And thank you, all the audience, for coming, listening, and for wonderful questions.